This is Command Post, a series of discussions about military matters from Time and the Center for a New American Security.
Patrick, I mean, when America was concerned about the Soviet Union, it was interesting because the Soviet Union and America were so far apart. The Soviet Union didn't make anything we really wanted. Now you cannot go into a Walmart in America without finding its shelves crammed with stuff made in China. Everything from Macs to shoes to, maybe cars not too far down the road. How does that make it different in terms of the struggles between these two big powers, the fact that each of us is so economically dependent on the other?
Well, I think that's a great question, Mark, because economic interdependence clearly has to affect the Chinese calculus. And yet, it's not sufficient to say that China and the United States could not have an inadvertent conflict, or that it doesn't have conflicts of interest. It does have conflicts of interest, and I think the big question strategically, from the Chinese perspective, if the United States is not seen as contributing to Chinese prosperity and peace, then China will essentially try to undermine U.S. interests. And this could be done very locally, or it could be done more strategically. China, remember, almost signed an alliance with the United States. Mao and then Deng Xiaoping both said, we don't want a formal alliance, we want to do this tacitly against the Soviet Union. So it wasn't about ideology. So it's also true that economic interdependence doesn't mean that we're suddenly thinking along the same lines about a global economic market. From Chinese perspective, this is still about nationalism and about whether the Chinese are prospering or more secure with the United States. So the United States has to understand this does not necessarily guarantee continuity, just because we have growing economic interdependence. And the big signs here in the last 3 years has been Chinese changing their calculus about American power and American staying power. This adds another layer of destabilization potential, because the Chinese may say, we're going to have to test whether America really wants to maintain primacy in the Western Pacific now that it's a declining economic power from their perspective. From the perspective of all the other Asian countries as well, economic interdependence is crucial, because for the Philippines, for instance, President Aquino of the Philippines has been arguing for the past few months that China is a huge threat to the Philippine national interests over the South China Sea. So what is President Aquino doing? He's heading to China to try to sign tens of billions of dollars of investment deals in the Philippines. And every country in Asia, including the United States, is looking at China as their number one or number two trading partner. So, yes, very different from the Soviet Union, but it doesn't guarantee peace.
And I think, the idea that economic interdependence guarantees peace, that doesn't fly. You could look at the first period of economic interdependence in the early 20th century. Who would have said World War I would have made sense?
In fact, people said that it was impossible because of the economic interdependence. Norman Angell.
Yeah, and so you've got to put that argument aside, especially in the case of China, because when China has felt aggrieved in the past, it has been willing to put all sorts of other national interests on the back burner. So then the question becomes, what are the kinds of scenarios in which there's the potential, God forbid, for a conflict? Of course, there is the Taiwan scenario, okay? That's the obvious one. And the others, I think, are really based on miscalculation, right? And that's why it's so absolutely critical for our two military and defense establishments to be talking to each other. Because nobody wants to get into a confrontation over miscalculation. That's the worst thing we could possibly do.
And have we done the kind of things we did with the Soviet Union, the hotline phones?
We now have a hotline, but it's been very difficult, frankly. The Chinese have never been signed up to the theologies that go along with confidence-building measures and all the theories of conflict prevention. We actually have a military maritime consultative agreement with the Chinese. That's sort of like the old incidents at sea agreement with the Soviets, so that our two navies can deconflict at the tactical and operational level. That hasn't gone too well, frankly. Not because the U.S. hasn't tried, but frankly because the Chinese side has been using this as a political hammer and has not been using it for the operational and tactical safety mechanism that it's supposed to be.